Today on an all-new Dr. Phil. Almost 2 years after George Floyd's murder. What's changed for Black Americans?
The problem is systemic racism.
Mass incarceration, police brutality.
Spend a week in a Black community. Feel what we feel. See what we see.
How can white allies help in the Black community?
Invest, provide opportunity.
Are you going to give me some of that macaroni and cheese or not? The murder of George Floyd on May 25th, 2020 sparked a nationwide movement. But it has been almost 2 years now, so the question is, what exactly has changed? I have invited leading experts in the fields of academia, law, education, real estate, and business to have a frank and open discussion. Before we meet my esteemed panel, let's take a look at the top issues we're going to talk about today.
Hundreds of Black voters marched at the Texas state capitol.
What we are seeing right now is an all-out assault on voting.
There were more than 1 million Black-owned businesses in the United States at the beginning of February. By mid-April, 440,000 Black business owners had to permanently shut.
The Federal Reserve says the median wealth for white families is almost 8 times that of Black families.
The gap could be widening between Black and white neighborhoods.
How can you win? You can't win. The game is fixed. So when they say, why did you burn down the community? It's not ours. We don't own anything.
There's a lot to get through today, so let's just jump right in. First, I want to introduce my panel of experts. Professor of Education and Business at the University of Southern California, Dr. Shawn Harper. Co-facilitator at the Ally Conversation Toolkit Workshop, Allison Mahaley. Attorney and Social Justice Advisor, Natasha Scruggs. President of the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, Lydia Pope. And Director at the American Civil Liberties Union, Rashad Turner. Thank you all for being here. Yeah, I really wanted to talk about where we are now versus where we were a couple of years ago. And Dr. Harper, you told my staff that centuries of systemic racism certainly won't be undone in a summer. We know that. But is progress being made?
Well, I think that one noteworthy indicator of progress is that there's now more national and global consciousness about anti-Blackness and about structural and systemic racism. But consciousness alone will not redress centuries of racial violence, negligence, and harm. We need policy change.
Has there ever been a better time to be Black in America than now?
Well, honestly, I'm 46, and all 46 years of my life, I've enjoyed being Black in America. What we see almost always is a 3 steps forward, 2 steps back as it pertains to racial equity and racial progress for Black Americans and other people of color. Think about, for example, the victory, if you want to call it that we saw in the Derek Chauvin trial, the murderer of George Floyd, right? That felt like progress. To be sure, justice for me means that George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and others would still be alive. But still, right? Like, some folks celebrated the outcome in Derek Chauvin's trial as victory. But then there's the outcome in the Kim Potter trial, right? Where she is sentenced to 2 years in prison for killing a Black man. That is what I mean by the 3 steps forward, 2 steps back.
Right. And Allison, what events in your life have inspired you to speak up for the Black community? I mean, as a white ally, and you've put action steps in your advocacy. It hasn't been just in your heart. You've put action steps in.
Just having the courage to move from understanding these things and admitting that they're problems to being to crossing that line and saying, I personally can do something about this. So in terms of my personal life, what happened? I was a school teacher. I taught 7th grade in a rural county in North Carolina, and I got my end of grade scores at the end of the year, and not one black boy in my class passed the reading test. And I had to look at that. I can look at those facts, and because of the kind of person that I am, I knew that I had to take responsibility for that. And that changed the course of my life. And I think it changed the course of some of the students in my classroom's lives.
Yeah, no doubt, because you see it and do something about it. The first topic is a controversial one, and that's voter suppression. What is it? How does it affect the average black American? And that's coming up right after the break.
Republican lawmakers are taking extreme steps to change voting laws.
Minority voters are concerned.
Tomorrow.
12 years ago, we covered a horrific story.
Her baby was starved to death by a religious group.
She has never had the courage to tell her story until now.
She said there's something inside of him, which she said was a demon, and that it had to come out by prayer and fasting.
Was the child deprived of food, water for several days?
The shocking details.
The baby's body began to decompose. How long did you stay?
I just want to leave him.
That's tomorrow. Then on Wednesday.
I suffer with Tourette syndrome.
People have accused you of faking this.
It's real. I decided to show people the real me.
Well, I'm joined today by leading experts from the fields of academia, law, and activism to discuss where we are as a nation, particularly since the death of George Floyd and the protests across America and overseas. Now, one hot topic that continues to divide Americans is voter suppression, which has a long and ugly history in the U.S., but some say it has recently resurfaced. Take a look.
Tonight, Republican lawmakers in dozens of states are taking extreme steps to change voting laws. The Democrats accuse them of trying to limit turnout, especially among minority groups.
Republicans in more than 40 states are now pushing more than 250 proposals to curb at least some voter access.
A new CBS News study shows minority voters are concerned over new voting rights. Some voters of color say many of the proposals currently up for debate will make it harder to cast their ballot.
Hundreds of black voters marched at the Texas state capitol, calling for a stop to Republican-proposed voting restrictions in the legislature.
In Florida, Republicans want to limit the use of ballot drop boxes, while in Iowa, voters could end up with less time to return mail-in ballots.
Georgia lawmakers are meeting for a special session to redraw district maps based on the 2020 census.
The state of Georgia has just overnight passed a new law that really attacks a key tenet of American democracy, that is, the right to vote. It limits the use of ballot drop boxes, imposes new voter ID requirements for absentee ballots, and it makes it a crime to just give someone waiting in line to vote anything to drink or any food.
Particularly voters of color express a lot of concern that these new restrictions are going to disproportionately impact them and make it harder for them to vote.
The John Lewis Voting Rights Act, as you know, was failed this week. How long do black voters have to wait for the president to deliver for them?
What we are seeing right now is an all-out assault on voting.
Do you think there is active voter suppression going on?
Well, I think, Dr. Phil, we do see examples of voter suppression happening around the country. The thing that I like to point out, though, with voter suppression is that it's never really an issue when things are going well for the Democrats. When the Democrats feel some type of pressure, they feel like they're losing that black vote that continuously gets them elected, then it becomes an issue. I will say that not being able to give people water or food as they're standing in line is as ridiculous as it sounds.
Yeah. And you say that's important because black voters will stand in line all day long.
Absolutely.
If necessary. And if they can't go to the bathroom, they can't get a drink, they can't get some nourishment or whatever, then that cuts that line down.
Absolutely. Right. So I think we all want the opportunity to exercise that right to vote. But the question that always comes up in my community is, do we see those votes translate to Black lives actually improving?
Yeah. And Natasha, you say incarceration is the biggest barrier.
I say incarceration is the biggest barrier because there are 2.2 million people in America that are incarcerated. There are 7.8 million people on probation and parole. All of those people do not have the right to vote. Most people think that once they become formally incarcerated, the country calls them felons. I don't use that term. But most people think that formally incarcerated people cannot vote. And they're afraid to vote because they don't want to be penalized for that. So that means that we have almost 10 million Americans currently that cannot vote. And these are the most vulnerable.
A lot of critics say, Sean, that this is not about suppressing the vote, it's about suppressing fraud. And there's been a lot of study about this. If somebody wants to actually dig down and look at non-traditional voting, like mail-in votes prior to voting prior to actual election day, that sort of thing. And I've actually done a deep dive on that. And I can't find one shred of evidence that suggests that that favors one party over the other or increases the level of fraud one whit. I can't find it from any independent evaluators, whether they're left, right, or center. So what are we talking about here?
We're talking about...
What's the fraud?
There is no fraud.
That's why I can't find the fraud.
I think that, there are these scare tactics, these boogeymen, if you will. And this is one of them that, Black people and other people of color are stealing votes and that dead people are voting and so on and so forth. When we look at the evidence across the states, oftentimes there are one or two or maybe a dozen cases out of millions of voters. This is just not a thing. This is about Georgia turning blue. It is about other states in the 2020 election that were flipped. So this is really about suppressing, the influence of Black voters, most especially Black women voters who turn out in historic numbers in these elections. It's about undoing the influence of Black voters.
Mm-hmm. How is the now illegal practice of redlining still affecting Black America's ability to buy homes and build generational wealth? We'll talk about the changes that need to happen to close the wealth gap between Black and white next.
The Federal Reserve says the median wealth for white families is almost 8 times that of Black families.
The gap could be widening between Black and white neighborhoods.
One of the drivers of that wealth gap is redlining, the practice of mortgage lenders denying loans.
Well, today is the last day of Black History Month, and we're discussing the societal inequalities between Black and white people in America and assessing whether there has been really any substantive change since the global protests that resulted from the deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery in 2020. Now, one area that my panel of experts all agree on are the reported racial disparities in real estate practices and income. Take a look.
America has a major racial wealth gap.
The Federal Reserve says the median wealth for white families is almost 8 times that of Black families.
A new report found 19% of Black families in the U.S. have a negative net worth.
typical black family has only a fraction of the wealth of the typical white family. And many experts say that the root of that problem is real estate.
The gap could be widening between black and white neighborhoods.
One of the drivers of that wealth gap is redlining, the practice of mortgage lenders denying loans to people based on their race or where they live, with those areas marked with red lines on maps. Although the practice was outlawed in 1968, its effects are still being felt today.
I think you see it in every city in America. I mean, this is where the basis of segregated neighborhoods remains to this day. So you still are living with the generational divide and the wealth gap that happens because of that.
Despite the practice being illegal, black loan applicants are still turned away by banks at a higher rate than white applicants. The widespread use of redlining has allowed generations of white Americans to build wealth through equity in homes and businesses, further widening a wealth gap African Americans have yet to rebound from.
Activist Kimberly Jones went viral when she compared the economic inequality black people face to the game of Monopoly.
I played 400 rounds of Monopoly with you, and I had to play and give you every dime that I made. And then for 50 years, every time that I played, if you didn't like what I did, you got to burn it like they did in Tulsa. How can you win? You can't win. The game is fixed. So when they say, why do you burn down the community? It's not ours. We don't own anything.
That's the equity. We don't own anything. And when there is ownership in homes, it's not at the same level as far as the value of the home, the equity in the home. It's not the same. So building wealth is an uphill battle.
When the gap is getting wider, when you go from 44% to 43%, it doesn't look like blacks are moving up. We're moving down. And it's because of all the different systematic racism that is in place today that has to change, and it has to stop, and it has to start from community, but it has to end on the top where they begin to make a change in America. The more that they continue to allow the challenges in the loan practicing, the loan level where blacks are having higher interest rates. When blacks, if you have a 720 credit score and you got $7,000 in the bank, you're still going to have a worse loan than a white American that has the same amount. That is true. I've experienced it with my family member. And I took her to the bank and I made the bank make an adjustment on her loan product. And that exists today.
So people know with redlining, we're talking about discriminatory lending practice dating back to the 1930s, when lenders would draw red lines on maps around neighborhoods that were predominantly black as a way to deny a mortgage, claiming it was high risk. I mean, it was just blatant. There's no other way to describe it, right?
Yeah, redlining is still there. Just because you don't see the red lines on the map doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Yeah, it still exists. What do you want to say?
As a white person, I was actually explicitly told that if a black person moved into our neighborhood, it would lower the value of our homes. And so these practices were put into place to cause white flight out of neighborhoods so that realtors could come in and buy the properties at lower prices and then flip them. I mean, this has been going on, but the thing is that this is about bias. This is about unconscious bias, and it is so anti-black bias is so predominant in our country, and no one wants to talk about that.
I've experienced a story of steering. When I bought my first house, I went to buy my first home. They took me into a neighborhood that I didn't ask. So when they did that, I didn't buy the property. Guess what I did? I decided to get my real estate license and run the national black organization to talk about the issues with steering and the importance of putting black folks where you want them to go rather where they want to go.
Two Long Island realtors accused of racial discrimination are, according to reports, back to business as usual. So what happened there? We'll find out next. We've been talking about the developing issue people are now starting to recognize, real estate discrimination against black Americans. And after a 2019 Newsday expose revealed systemic racial steering in which real estate agents direct home buyers to specific localities based on their race, on Long Island, 67 agents and executives were subpoenaed as part of a state probe into the matter that ultimately resulted in new legislation. This kind of made people stand up and take notice that there was really something to this, and they couldn't just continue to do this without people paying attention. Now, overall, agents provided white 50% more listings than blacks. Now, think about that. 50% more listings were shown to white buyers than black buyers. And, you know, you said something interesting about getting into the law. You said, yeah, we do need black lawyers, but we need people that understand the struggles. They don't just need to understand the law. They need to understand the struggles of the people functioning under the law. That's what really motivated you.
Absolutely. I believe that when you have that experience and when you have family members that are going through this, that are being discriminated against on every level, you can understand what's best on how to treat them. As far as real estate, appraisals are even discriminatory. A black family will try to get an appraisal on their home, and they will have their white friend get it, and it'll be higher. So it all, like we said over and over and over, racial discrimination and racial bias is the biggest factor in all of this stuff. And so it's all just these biases, these paradigms that are not real, that if people could just question them and not just go along with it and say, why do I think this? Why do I think that this black family deserves less? Why do I think that this black neighborhood deserves less, this black school deserves less, or this black person accused of a crime deserves less?
The black folks I know, and I know lots of them, black people don't choose to be poor. We don't choose to go to underfunded schools. We don't choose to be in communities that lack resources and jobs. We don't choose to, live in communities where we have inequitable access to high quality health care. We don't choose to be in the lowest paid, least powerful roles in corporations and other places where we work. There are systems that, cyclically place us in those positions.
So let's be real. A black community, we know that we have challenges with the schools. We know we have challenges even with the grocery stores that doesn't have healthy foods. We have challenges, not just all of those, but in the police force. We don't have enough in the community to assist us. So what do we do about it? What are the solutions? So again, it goes back to the partnerships of everyone, white, black, Asian, Hispanic. You have to come into our community, feel what we feel, see what we see. I encourage you to spend a week in a black community. Come back to my old neighborhood and see how you feel. Tell me what you get when you leave my neighborhood after that day, when you can't even walk to a store because there's a payday lender down the street, or you have to get food that is expired. So these are the things we have to bring education back, but we have to come together as NARAB and anyone to bring it all together.
The thing I would say to allies like Alan.
Rashad, what ultimately informed your decision to leave the Black Lives Matter movement?
There was a lot. I think Black Lives Matter at the time, I believe it was about 2016, where Black Lives Matter, along with the NAACP and the American Federation of Teachers, called for a moratorium on charter schools. And to me, that was an attack on black families. I believe 80% across the United States of black families and also other people of color appreciate and support charter schools. So the CBLM come out and say, hey, we don't think there should be any more charter schools was completely absurd to me and did not show me that this organization truly believed that our Black Lives Matter. One other thing I would point out is that I think we've spent years, decades trying to change the hearts and minds of everyone in this country, except for our own people. Miss Lydia mentioned that when she ran into difficulties trying to find housing, discrimination, she mentioned that she went and got her real estate license, right? She had that determination. And I think that's what's missing from the black narrative right now. I don't think we hear about how great we actually are as Black people. And I don't think we hear the message that we as a people have to step up. I think it's much easier to sort of go with the flow of blaming white supremacy, discrimination, all of these things. But you're looking at 4 Black people up here out of many in this country who have found a way to be successful. And I will tell you, I don't think any of us stopped at just blaming white supremacy or blaming the system, right? So the thing I would say to allies like Allison and others, you have to stop helping us, right? Stop trying to help us, because it hasn't led to Black people being able to stand on our own 2 feet in this country.
I wholeheartedly disagree with that. First of all,
So do I. I honestly believe that the problem is systemic racism.
I'm just going to say, I'm here because my grandfather, who grew up in a economically violent area, meaning that the state was economically violent, he got his master's degree and he went to law school, but he couldn't finish. I can't expect for Black people whose grandparents were denied access to education, whose grandparents were denied access to jobs, to have the same opportunities that I have. What you're saying is, look at us. That's exceptionalism. That's not for the masses.
Absolutely.
When we talk about allies, what we're talking about is white people talking to other white people and inviting them into understanding that racism against white people is not a thing. The racism that exists in America was built on slavery, on the backs of Black people, and it has evolved into mass incarceration. And we need to understand that making things better for people of color is not going to make it worse for white people.
I believe in a concept called the dominoes of oppression, and I believe that there are millions of dominoes that fall that lead us to mass incarceration and lead us to police brutality, and I believe that all of them need their own individualized attention. Of course, we tell our kids everything that we possibly can. My grandparents, my mother told me everything, but when I step into the school and they tell me that I'm not smart, and they tell me that I'm dumb and I can't read, and they tell me that I'm a criminal if I skip school, and they tell me I can't go to college. When I got to college, they told me I could not be an attorney. They told me they could not see me as an attorney. So I can't say...
But who counterbalances that message for you?
Like I said, it was my upbringing.
Well, let's turn our focus to changes that need to happen with small businesses who were severely impacted by coronavirus shutdowns and social distancing. Next, I visited a Black-owned, Black-run restaurant in South Los Angeles to hear firsthand how racism affects Black-owned businesses. Oh, man, it smells good. Everything I see coming out of here looks good. How can white allies help in the Black community? Log on to drphil.com and click on Be on the Show at the top of the homepage. I hope to hear from you soon. When you add an unequal wealth gap and chronic underfunding to the mix, Black-owned businesses are especially at risk. Well, I wanted to learn more about this problem, so I visited a popular soul food restaurant in South Los Angeles, Alta Adams, to meet the owner and chef, Keith Corbin, and his terrific staff. Hey, guys. How are you? Man, it smells good in here.
Man, how you doing? Thank you.
Welcome
to Alta. Welcome to Alta, man.
Oh, man,
glad to have
good. Thanks for having me. Why was choosing this historic West Adams neighborhood important to you?
I'm from Watts, like not too far from here, on the other side of South Central. And I know this community from growing up in LA. So it just felt just like home. We were very intentional on like connecting with the community when we came in.
How diversified is your customer base?
Very.
Good food finds an audience.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We intend to cook with love in order to feed the soul, to nourish and sustain people, no matter who you are, Black, white, Asian, or other.
Everything I see coming out of here looks good. Are these your recipes?
Yes.
Let's go do this. Let's find a place to chow down. Do you feel more comfortable working in a restaurant where you serve the community that you know and that know you? And
I feel a lot more comfortable and like I can be myself at work. Like I've never worked somewhere where I can walk through the door and not have to change how I speak or like how I interact with anyone. So I'm like 100% myself at work, which I really appreciate here. And that goes for like the whole staff. I feel like we've cultivated an environment where everyone can be themselves. And it shows. That's amazing.
Yeah.
How can White Allies help support and create more businesses like this in the Black community?
Invest.
And intention, I think, like being intentional with purchases and doing your due diligence and researching and putting your money toward Black businesses.
Not just patronage, but investing into businesses?
Yeah.
If you're an investor or an entrepreneur, you can invest in other companies and help them build as a way to give back. And then also continue your patronage outside of Black History Month, Juneteenth, those holidays. Just pick a random Sunday to show up or a random Tuesday for lunch.
For me, it's just all about opportunity, and that's why it's very important that we provide opportunity. And I like to provide opportunity for people that's in the situation I was similar at.
You help former inmates.
Yes. I'm a former inmate.
I know. And you give them jobs here?
Yes. Like when we opened this restaurant, everybody on the management staff running the restaurant were formerly incarcerated. Me, my sous chef, my general manager, everybody. Like there's many people in these communities that if they had an opportunity, like can bring value to our society. So going back to that question about what can allies do or what white America can do, like provide opportunity. And like more importantly, recognize that we have value, right?
Yeah, I was homeless when I was a teenager. Tyler Perry is a dear friend of mine. He was living in his car.
I was homeless before this.
Yeah, and somebody always had to help. It's not hand out, it's hand up.
Yeah.
And one thing I can do, of course, is talk about it because I got a big megaphone. Allegra, your supervisor, Pastor Austin, pitched me doing this topic, and she and I have done a lot of shows in this space before. What was it like putting this show together?
Yeah, I feel like this is a really important topic to do. And I'm also thankful that we get to use your platform, Dr. Phil, and that you want to help, you know, amplify Black voices. I think there's a lot of stereotypes having to do with Black lives and what Black people can do and aspire to be. And I think that it's really important to show positive Black people, you know, on this stage and on this platform.
Mariana, you say you've never been treated any differently.
I definitely feel like I've never been treated differently for what I do. And I think, especially where we work, everyone is very accepting.
Another thing that I love about our show is we also have an amazing African-American female, you know, at the top in a position of power in Astra. And so it's really important, I'm sure you know, Dr. Phil, like to be able to have us behind the scenes making the decisions and to have a seat at the table to be able to bring forward and, you know, produce stories like this. So
when I came on board, Dr. Phil, I realized his voice has such a wide reach to reach people that are not in a diverse neighborhood and do not know about other cultures, but he is able to help people expand their mind. I think that's so much of what we need right now.
Times are changing, and nothing's changing as fast as we want it to, but it's changing. So, LaFern, are you going to give me some of that macaroni and cheese or not?
You know, this is all mine, but...
That's my question for you.
She ate all the cheese off the top.
Really good food.
Yes, it's great.
And you got a great staff. Mine eats all the cheese off the top of the stuff, but, you know, what are you going to do? Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
Well, Keith is here now in the studio audience, so hello again, Keith.
Hey, buddy.
I want to thank you again for the amazing hospitality that you showed to me and my staff there. You've been watching all hour long. What's your takeaway from this discussion here? What do you think needs underlining more than anything else?
I mean, everybody made great points. Just from my experience, because I've lived both. I lived in the gang culture. Did 10 years in prison, and now I am, me and my fiance are homeowner in an affluent area, right? And I have a business. So I can speak from both sides. And it's not just about picking up yourself, picking up your bootstrap, or like the young lady was saying, the exception being for everybody. Like, I can't expect, like, the people that I grew up with to be where I'm at. Because I had opportunity. Someone actually gave me an opportunity, right? Placed value on me, seen value in me. And I think that, for the most part, from my experience, America just does not value black. That's just from my experience, how I feel.
Yeah, and then you did say yesterday, when you were given that opportunity, you really seized it. And I asked you what your biggest obstacle was, and you said discipline.
Discipline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's certainly a smooth-running operation now, I can tell you. I certainly give it the thumbs up. I can tell you for sure the food is great. Today's topic is an important one. We went longer than our allotted time. You can see more of our conversation on drphil.com. I would really like to thank all of my guests here today. And one of the things I would really like to acknowledge is everybody being willing to have an open conversation about this and hear everybody else out. I think if everybody would have this approach, it would be not about winning an argument, but about solving a problem. And so I really applaud you guys for your approach to this. Coming up, my next guest was here about a month ago, and I gave her a challenge. Did she follow through? Well, she's back. We'll find out next. Thanks so much. Was here about a month ago and told me that she loves her career in the entertainment industry, but needed a way to manage her stress. So I gave her some tips and challenged her to start doing at least one. Now, she also received a challenge on how to improve her appearance and confidence on the red carpet. Let's take a look at what happened when we first met Brianna.
My job is like a roller coaster. Every day is not the same.
So what do you do to take care of yourself?
My job leaves me little time to actually care for myself.
Take 10 minutes a day to manage that stress.
Sometimes my skin issues affect my confidence in my job. Things that bother me about my skin are my hyperpigmentation.
I'm no expert on the skincare, but joining us virtually is Elaine Swan, lifestyle expert and spokesperson for Olay. Elaine, what specifically would you recommend that she do?
I'm sending you these two products, and I want you to use them for the next 28 days.
Brianna, you have your assignments. Are you ready to do it?
Yes, Dr. Phil, I'm ready to get started.
Well, Brianna, it's good to have you back.
It's great to be back.
You accepted my 28-day challenge to try and relieve some of the stress related to your job managing celebrity talent. I suggested you either take 10 minutes to try to really do some focused relaxation or meditation, journal to really kind of empty your mind, and to stop multitasking. So did you try any of these?
Yes, I actually tried the first one.
Okay, great.
I took mini breaks throughout the day and just kind of walked away from everything to relax myself.
Has it helped with some of your stress?
Yes, I was surprised that just taking those breaks throughout the day, it did make me feel calmer. Yeah, it was really great. I definitely felt the difference, and I plan to increase those times after award season.
Yeah, you were also given a challenge by Elaine Swan, lifestyle expert and spokesperson for Olay, and she's joining us virtually. I'm sure she wants to hear how you did with her tips. So, Elaine, good to see you.
Thank you for having me back, Dr. Phil. Now, Brianna, last time you were with us, you talked to us about the hyperpigmentation and dullness of your skin, and working with celebrities and also in the public eye makes you feel a little bit self-conscious about your overall outward appearance. Now, I gave you two Olay products to try: the Vitamin C Moisturizer to help brighten dull skin tone, and the Retinol 24 Night Moisturizer to help smooth out your skin's texture. Now, I challenged you to use both of those products for 28 days. Did you do it?
Yes, Elaine, I did it. I was a little skeptical at first, but I kept my word for 28 days.
And you actually sent us a video diary to show us how the challenge went. So let's take a look.
It's been a week. Some of my dark spots have been lightening up on my cheeks. Now we're in week 2, and I have to say my skin has felt hydrated all day long. Oh my gosh, we are finally at week 3 of my skincare journey with Olay. My cheek area hasn't had any dark spots. It's been great to feel confident with a clear face, and I will continue to use these products even past my 28 days.
Well, so Elaine, how do you think she did?
Oh, it looks like such a great success. I can definitely see the improvement in your skin. It looks much brighter, and even your dark spots are fading as well.
So, Brianna, how are you feeling about the results?
Like I said, my skin stayed hydrated throughout the day, and my skin stayed clear, so I couldn't be happier.
Elaine, you have one more tip for her, right?
Yes, I do. Now, Brianna, it's very important to round out your skincare routine with a sunscreen, especially when you're using a retinol. And it's very, very important to use a sunscreen to protect your skin all year round. And Olay has an SPF product that I really like. All of these products can be found at Olay.com and retailers nationwide. But Brianna, Olay wants you to continue on this skincare journey. So they're giving you a year's supply of all 3 products.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much.
All right. There you go. Good job. Good job. I want to thank my guests today, and a special thanks to Brianna, Elaine Swan, and Olay. Now, if you'd like to join us here in the studio audience, just go to my website, drphil.com, for all the details. Be sure to follow me on all the social media platforms and join our Facebook page just for fans, Dr. Phil Fanatics. That's PHAN. And don't forget to follow and subscribe to my podcast, Fill in the Blanks, where I provide critical information on some of the most important issues that we're facing today. And also Robin's podcast, I've Got a Secret with Robin McGraw. You can find them both on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll see you next time. Thanks for being here. Thanks a lot.